Jim had no idea that a snowy Valentine's weekend would be the last peaceful moment of his marriage. Living in Madison, Wisconsin, with his wife Linda and their 2 children, he had always seen their family as solid, unshakable. Linda was a talented seamstress, quiet and elegant, often praised by neighbors and friends. Jim owned a modest construction firm and spent most evenings at home. They weren't rich, but they were stable. Or so he thought. It began subtly, the unraveling. Linda started going out with her friends more often, mostly on the weekends. Jim didn't mind at first. After all, everyone needed a break. But the outings became more frequent, the stories vaguer. Then came the night of her friend Denise's birthday, a night Jim didn't attend. Linda had laughed it off, saying it was just a girls-only thing, and Jim believed her. That evening, while putting the kids to bed, he happened to scroll past a video on Facebook. Someone had tagged Linda. It was a short clip from a party, nothing explicit, but enough to raise his pulse. Linda, laughing, holding a cake shaped in a way that didn't sit well with him, surrounded by drunk women hooting and filming everything. That was the moment a splinter entered his trust. He didn't say anything. Not yet. 2 weeks later, another weekend plan emerged. A girls' night out. This time, Linda was less enthusiastic, oddly careful in her wording. Just a little dancing, maybe dinner. Denise's idea again. Jim nodded, watching her pack an overnight bag. You're staying the night? He asked. Only if the weather's bad. We might get snow, she replied, avoiding his eyes. That night, Jim couldn't sleep. He checked the weather, no snow. He checked her Instagram, no new posts. Odd. Linda posted every night. By 2 a.m., the quiet in the house gnawed at him. He finally drifted off sometime after 3. The next morning, she came home with coffee, smiling like nothing happened. Jim didn't confront her, but her scent was different. She had showered, but something, intuition maybe, told him she hadn't come straight home. He nodded slowly as she chatted with the kids, acting like all was normal. The days passed, but the sense of unease stayed. Jim noticed Linda texting more, but shielding her phone when he walked by. One evening, while she was in the shower, a notification lit up her screen. Can't wait for Friday, winking face M. Jim stared at it. Just a letter, but enough to send a current of heat through his chest. He didn't unlock the phone. Instead, he opened his laptop and began searching. He wasn't the suspicious type, not naturally. But he'd learned long ago that when your gut talks, you listen. He started with and Denise. Then Linda and Club Madison. Within minutes, he found tagged photos from previous nights, ones Linda had never mentioned. She was there, dressed in a way Jim hadn't seen before. Hands on her waist, not always hers. Still, no proof. Only shadows. That Friday, Jim decided to wait. Linda said she had dinner plans again. Just the girls. She smiled. I'll be back by midnight. Jim nodded, kissed her cheek, and watched her leave in her favorite blue dress, the one she claimed was for him. He waited 20 minutes, then grabbed his keys. Downtown Madison wasn't big. Jim parked 2 blocks from the club he suspected they'd be at and walked. It didn't take long. He saw her immediately through the large street-facing window. Linda, laughing, holding a glass of wine, sitting beside a man in a charcoal suit with slick hair and confident posture. Jim stood still, heart pounding. He didn't rush in. He didn't make a scene. Instead, he took out his phone and quietly took a few photos. Then he turned and walked away. At home, he couldn't sleep. Linda came home at 1:17 a.m. She walked in quietly, slipped off her shoes, and crept upstairs. Jim was in bed, facing the wall. She didn't notice he was awake. The next morning, he made coffee and handed her a cup. Had fun last night? He asked. She blinked, clearly surprised. Yeah, it was good. Long night. Tired. He didn't push it. Sunday, while she was out grocery shopping, Jim installed a discreet app on her phone. Nothing illegal, just tracking her messages and location. It was desperation, not cruelty. He needed to know. The following Friday, the truth arrived like a freight train. Jim was in the garage when he got the alert. Linda had messaged someone saved in her phone as Mark. He opened the log. The message read, "You were amazing last night. Same place next week?" Winky face, followed by, "He has no idea. I feel a little guilty, but not enough to stop." Jim dropped the wrench. He sat in the garage, reading every thread. There were dozens of messages going back weeks. Flirting, confessions, even logistics. She had been careful, changing names, deleting photos, but the app stored everything. Mark was Mark Lavelle, a local ex-football player turned business consultant. Popular. Charming. Married. Jim took a deep breath. Then he stood, walked into the kitchen, and poured himself a coffee. He didn't confront her that day. Or the next. He started gathering emails, screenshots, messages, timestamps. A methodical operation. Jim knew the law, knew reputation mattered. If Linda wanted to play dirty, he'd play cleaner and smarter. A week later, Linda left for yoga class. Jim followed her. Not close, just enough to watch. She didn't go to the gym. She went to a hotel. Room 514. He saw her meet Mark in the lobby and go up together. Jim waited in the car. 2 hours later, he saw her walk out alone. He didn't follow. He didn't need to anymore. Back at home, he greeted her like normal. Even kissed her cheek. Inside, a storm was forming. The next morning, Jim dropped the kids off at school and returned home with a singular focus: preparation. No shouting, no messy accusations. Just precision. He backed up the messages, the location logs, even screenshots of Linda's social media in case she started deleting things. He consulted with a lawyer discreetly, under the guise of business tax planning. When the attorney reviewed the evidence, he raised an eyebrow and said, "You've already done half my job for me." Jim wanted full custody and was advised to document not only the infidelity, but any signs of neglect or instability. That weekend, he began recording Linda's erratic sleep schedule, how often she left the children with sitters, even noting how often she skipped family dinners. She still smiled at him, kissed him in the hallway, and called him "my rock" on social media, as if the internet could hide the truth. But Jim saw the cracks in her performance. The tension in her eyes. The way she flinched slightly when he entered a room unannounced. She knew, somewhere deep down, that the walls were closing in, but denial is a powerful drug. The turning point came unexpectedly on a Thursday night. Linda returned home late, claiming an extra Pilates class. She dropped her gym bag near the couch and ran upstairs to shower. Jim, calm as ever, opened the bag and found a crumpled receipt from a restaurant. Table for two, wine pairing, dessert sampler. Not from any gym he knew. He left the receipt on the kitchen table without a word. The next morning, she avoided eye contact as she sipped her coffee. Jim said nothing. Instead, he kissed her on the forehead and asked what she'd like for dinner. That night, she stayed home. Friday came. Jim received a call from the private investigator he'd hired last week. Mark and Linda were seen together at a condo he rented under a false name. Video, photos, timestamped. It was enough. Jim printed everything, placed it in a sealed folder, and tucked it under his coat. That evening, he invited Linda out to dinner. "Just the two of us," he said with a warm smile. She hesitated, then agreed. She dressed up, wore red lipstick, and picked the dress she once wore on their 10th anniversary. They ate quietly at a riverside restaurant, and Jim made small talk about the kids, the house, her new hobbies. Linda laughed, relaxed, even held his hand. For a moment, she might have believed everything was fine. Until dessert arrived, and so did the envelope. Jim slid it across the table gently. "What's this?" she asked, confused. "Truth," he replied. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Her face changed in stages: confusion, fear, then cold realization. You followed me? She whispered. No, Jim said calmly. You left a trail. I just walked behind you. She stared at the pages, at the images and transcripts. I can explain, she muttered. No need, Jim replied, signaling the waiter for the check. I'm not angry, Linda. I'm done. Back home, Jim packed her things into her car. He changed the locks, updated the garage code, and sent her a formal message. Your belongings are in the driveway. Please don't return without an appointment. That weekend, he told the children simply. Mommy made some choices that mean she'll be living somewhere else for a while. They cried. He cried with them. But the worst was over. Or so he thought. Because Monday morning, the story hit the local news. Mark Lavelle, former football star, had been spotted leaving a private condo with a married woman, Linda's face clearly visible in the blurred photo. Headlines didn't name her, but locals didn't need names. Jim's phone exploded with calls. Friends. Family. Even the kid's school counselor. And Linda? She posted a video online, tearful, shaky, claiming she was lost, confused, pressured. Jim said nothing. He posted no rebuttal. He didn't need to. His silence, his calm, his dignity, those were his final words. Within 48 hours, Jim's inbox was overflowing with sympathy messages, job offers, and unexpected support from old friends and even strangers. The internet had unofficially crowned him the calmest betrayed man in America. Memes spread showing his stoic face from a family photo captioned with phrases like, "Brace under fire," and, "He knew. He planned. He acted." Despite the chaos around him, Jim remained focused on the children. He met with their school counselor, explained the basics of the situation without villainizing Linda, and requested patience during what would be a transition for everyone. Meanwhile, Linda's life was unraveling at a rapid pace. Mark, under pressure from his business partners, distanced himself from her publicly. A statement was released from his PR team. Mr. Lavelle deeply regrets his involvement in a private matter that has become public. He takes full responsibility for his actions and is cooperating with all parties involved. Translation: he was cutting Linda loose to save face. She tried to reach out to Jim multiple times, emails, texts, even a voice message left at 2:14 a.m. filled with slurred regret and empty promises. He didn't respond. He had moved past anger and into clarity. With the help of his lawyer, Jim filed for full custody, citing infidelity, emotional neglect, and abandonment. His lawyer attached the file of evidence he had compiled: photos, message logs, videos from the PI, and a psychological report from the children's counselor indicating emotional disruption caused by instability in the household. Jim's lawyer smiled after reviewing it all. "You just made my job very easy," she said. Linda's lawyer, on the other hand, seemed completely unprepared when the documents hit her desk. And when the judge saw the photos, reviewed the timeline, and read Jim's calm, respectful affidavit, he didn't hesitate to grant a temporary custody order in Jim's favor while the divorce process began. Linda's response was to storm into Jim's front yard 3 days later, demanding to speak with him. He didn't answer the door. She screamed. She cried. The neighbors watched from behind curtains. Jim sat inside with the kids, headphones on, playing a board game. When she finally left, he sent a single text. "Please respect the court order. Contact will go through the lawyer." Linda's spiral accelerated. She tried to make her case on social media again, posting a tearful selfie, a blurry screenshot of a conversation with Jim that was quickly debunked, and finally, a cryptic quote. "Sometimes the good guys are the worst liars." The comment section did not go in her favor. By then, local reporters were sniffing around, and a producer from a daytime talk show even contacted Jim for a possible interview. He declined. "My children don't need to watch me become a headline," he said. He wasn't chasing attention, he was building a new life. Quietly. Steadily. At night, he sat with his kids and helped them with homework. He started jogging again. He took up woodworking, something he had put off for years. And slowly, His smile began to return, not for the camera, but for himself. But just as things seemed to stabilize, a thick envelope arrived in the mail one Thursday afternoon. It wasn't from Linda's attorney. It was from Mark Lavelle's legal team. Inside was a cease and desist order, accusing Jim of defamation, of causing undue harm to Mark's public image, and of allegedly leaking information to the press. Jim almost laughed. He took the envelope, scanned every page, and sent it directly to his attorney. Within hours, she responded, "Let them come. We've got receipts." What followed wasn't a court battle. It was a quiet dismantling of a public persona. Mark's private condo lease was leaked to the media. A second woman came forward, also married, claiming similar behavior from Mark. Then a third. A pattern emerged. Sponsors backed out. Clients canceled consultations. Mark Lavelle's empire crumbled in less than 2 months. Jim never celebrated publicly. But one night, while sanding down a new desk for Emma's room, he smiled to himself. Justice didn't need a spotlight. It just needed time. By early spring, the divorce was nearly finalized. Linda had moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, rarely seen and even more rarely heard from. Her social media accounts went dark. She stopped showing up to mutual friend gatherings. Invitations stopped coming. Word got around that she had been let go from her part-time job at the yoga studio. Due to complications. She had become a ghost in a town that once admired her. Jim, however, was more alive than he'd been in years. He repainted the house, reorganized the garage, and even planted a small vegetable garden with the kids, something Linda had always claimed was a waste of time. The kids seemed lighter, too. Less tension, fewer questions. Emma, now 8, stopped asking why Mom didn't come to school plays. Timmy, only 5, simply stopped mentioning her altogether. On weekends they built birdhouses, baked cookies, and took long walks by the lake. Life was smaller, but cleaner. Then came the letter. It wasn't from a lawyer or a judge, it was handwritten, in familiar cursive. Linda. She had sent it without a return address. Inside, the note was short. Apologetic. Desperate. "Jim, I've lost everything. I was wrong. You were always good to me. I miss the kids. I miss us. Please let me see them. Just once." Jim stared at the paper for a long time. Then he folded it and placed it back in the envelope. No response. Some decisions don't need to be made twice. But the court had allowed limited supervised visitation rights, and eventually, after several rescheduled appointments, Linda did show up for one. The meeting took place in a sterile office space, with a counselor present. Emma didn't run to her. Timmy didn't speak. Linda cried. Jim didn't. On the drive home, the kids were quiet until Emma whispered, "She seemed different." "She is," Jim replied. And that was enough. The weeks passed without incident until one day Jim was stopped at the grocery store by a stranger, a man in his 40s with a slight limp and a quiet voice. "You're Jim, right? From the Lavelle thing?" Jim tensed. "Yeah." The man nodded. "Just wanted to say thank you. My wife, well, she was headed down that road too. Your story made me pay attention. I stopped it in time." He held out his hand. "You helped more people than you know." Jim shook it and left the store in silence. That night, he lay awake thinking not about Linda, not about Mark, but about how easily silence can be mistaken for weakness, and how powerful it becomes when used with intention. Months later, Linda made one last attempt. She showed up at Emma's school unannounced during a parent-teacher conference. Jim had already checked in and was speaking with the math teacher when a staff member interrupted him. "Mr. Carlyle, there's someone here asking to see Emma. She says she's her mother." Jim stood still for a moment. "Where is Emma?" he asked. "Still in class," the teacher said. "Good. Keep her there." He walked to the front lobby where Linda stood, thinner than before, her hair flat, makeup smeared. "Jim," she said, voice shaking. "Please. Just 5 minutes." He didn't yell. He didn't create a scene. He simply pointed at the exit. Leave. Now. Before I call security. She looked at him, pleading. You can't erase me. I don't need to, he said. You're doing that yourself. The principal escorted her out, and the school tightened its visitation protocols immediately after. That was the last time Jim ever saw her in person. The divorce was finalized that June. Full custody awarded to Jim. Limited visitation, supervised only, no overnight stays. Child support adjusted to Linda's new income level, virtually none. She had no job, no credibility, and no stable home. Jim didn't celebrate. He marked the occasion by taking the kids to their favorite diner and ordering 3 slices of pie. 2 new traditions, he said, raising his fork. Emma and Timmy clinked theirs against his. Outside, the town moved on. Jim walked tall. And though his home was quieter, his life had never felt more honest. Summer settled over Madison with its warm evenings and soft, golden skies. Jim used the time to rebuild, not just his house or his routine, but the foundation of his family. The kids laughed more now. Emma had started painting, and her drawings often featured a smiling man with 2 small kids holding hands. Timmy insisted on reading bedtime stories, even if he fell asleep halfway through. Jim kept his focus simple: work hard, be present, stay grounded. And then, unexpectedly, came a message that nearly pulled him back. Audrey, the journalist who had first reached out during the scandal, sent him an email. Just checking in. Would love to know how things turned out. Jim thought for a long time before replying. They met for coffee the next Saturday. Audrey had a curious energy, sharp, observant, but kind. She asked about the aftermath, how the kids were doing, what his next steps were. He answered honestly, and when she asked if he had any regrets, he simply said, "Just that I didn't listen to my instincts sooner." They didn't talk much about Linda. Instead, they spoke about books, the changing seasons, the challenges of parenting solo. The conversation lasted hours. Jim wasn't ready for anything more, but it felt good to talk to someone who saw him as more than the guy from the scandal. Over the next few months, Audrey became a quiet presence. Not intrusive, just available. She met the kids one afternoon at a park, brought them lemonade and sketch pads. Emma liked her. Timmy asked if she was going to be his new mommy. Jim laughed, deflecting gently. One day at a school fundraiser, as they stood beside each other watching Emma perform, Audrey leaned in and whispered, "You know, you're allowed to be happy again." Jim looked at her and nodded. "I'm learning how." In the fall, Linda filed to have her visitation increased. Her lawyer claimed she had entered therapy and was working part-time. Jim didn't object. The court arranged a series of monitored sessions at a family center. The first few were awkward. The kids were distant, unsure. But over time, Emma began talking more. Timmy sometimes brought a toy to share. Jim observed quietly from the waiting room, never interfering. He didn't trust Linda, but he trusted his children to decide how they felt. And when Linda missed 2 appointments in a row and didn't call, he knew they had seen enough. Emma didn't ask about her mother after that. Not once. As winter returned and snow blanketed the city again, Jim sat by the window with a cup of coffee and watched the streetlights glow against the white. So much had changed in a year. His heart didn't ache the way it used to. He thought of Linda sometimes, not with anger, not even sadness. Just as a chapter that had closed. One morning, while helping Timmy button his jacket, his son looked up and asked, "Are we okay, Dad?" Jim smiled. "We're better than okay. We're free." That night, as he tucked the kids in, Emma handed him a drawing. It showed a house, a tree, 2 children, and a man standing in the middle, arms stretched wide. "That's you," she said. "You catch us when we fall." Jim kissed her forehead, turned off the light, and stepped into the quiet hallway. The storm had passed. And he was still standing. By the second winter since everything fell apart, Jim found himself standing in a place of peace he never thought possible. Life hadn't just recovered, it had realigned. The business was doing well, the kids were thriving, and the home felt calm. Even Linda, though still a ghost in their lives, had finally stopped interfering. There were no more letters, no surprise appearances, no courtroom attempts to reclaim anything she had lost. In many ways, she had vanished entirely, consumed by the fallout of her own choices. Jim hadn't heard from her in months until one morning, his phone rang. It was a doctor from the county psychiatric facility. "Mr. Carlyle," the voice said gently. "I'm calling about Linda." Jim felt his stomach tighten. "Is she okay?" "She's stable now," the doctor replied. "But there was an incident last night. She attempted to harm herself." Jim sat down. He didn't say anything. The doctor continued, explaining that she had been found in her apartment unconscious, pills, alcohol, isolation. She had left a note that simply said, "I don't know who I am anymore." Jim closed his eyes. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. "She's asking to see you," the doctor added. "Not the children, just you." "Why?" Jim asked quietly. "She says she wants to apologize." Jim hesitated. "I'll think about it." He didn't go that day. He waited 3. Then 5. On the 6th day, he drove to the facility just after the sun had set. It was a gray building, sterile and too quiet. A nurse guided him to a small room where Linda sat at a table, thinner than before, her eyes hollow. She looked up as he entered, as if trying to decide if he was real. "Hi," she said weakly. Jim nodded. "You wanted to see me." "I don't deserve it," she said. "But thank you." She looked at him, tears forming. "I ruined everything, didn't I?" Jim took a slow breath. "You did." She wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "I lost you. I lost the kids. I lost myself. We tried to love you," he said. "But you ran from it. I thought I was missing something. I thought I deserved more. And now?" She met his eyes. "Now I'd give anything to go back to that night and stay home." Jim stood silent. "I'm not here for forgiveness, Linda," he said finally. "But I hope you get better, for yourself." She nodded slowly, defeated but grateful. "You were always the strong one," she said. "Not strong," Jim corrected. "Just done." He left the facility without looking back. That night, he sat outside on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, the cold biting through the silence. Emma came out quietly and sat beside him. "You okay, Dad?" "Yeah," he replied, placing his arm around her shoulders. "Just thinking." "About her?" He nodded. "A little. I don't really remember her anymore," Emma said. "Is that bad?" Jim squeezed her gently. "Not bad. Just true." They watched the snow fall together, and for once, it didn't feel heavy. Life had moved on. And Jim had too. Spring brought with it a kind of quiet renewal Jim hadn't expected. He didn't mark anniversaries anymore, not the day of the betrayal, not the divorce, not even the last court date. Instead, he measured time by different things: Emma's art awards, Timmy learning to ride a bike, the way the house no longer echoed with tension. He and the kids had created new traditions. Friday night movie marathons. Saturday pancake breakfasts. Long Sunday walks around Lake Mendota, where they'd skip stones and talk about everything and nothing. One evening, as he tucked the kids into bed, Timmy asked, "Dad, do you ever get sad anymore?" Jim thought for a moment. "Sometimes," he said truthfully. "But mostly I feel lucky." Emma looked over. "Because we're still here?" He smiled. "Exactly." That night, as the kids slept, Jim sat at the kitchen table, flipping through a folder he hadn't opened in months. The one with all the documents from the divorce, the screenshots, the receipts. Evidence of another life. He placed the folder in a box and carried it to the garage. He didn't burn it. He didn't shred it. He just put it away. Some things don't need to be destroyed to lose their power. A week later, Audrey called. She was being offered a job in Chicago. Bigger paper, better pay, wider audience. "I wanted to tell you before I go," she said. I'll miss our walks. Jim smiled. You've been a good friend. You're one of the few stories I'll carry with me, she said. Not because it was dramatic, but because it ended with dignity. That's rare? Rarer than it should be. They met one last time for coffee. She hugged him at the car, a little tighter than before. You're going to be just fine, Jim. I already am, he said. Summer arrived like a slow, warm breath. Jim signed Timmy up for soccer and bought Emma her first proper canvas easel. He worked, he grilled, he laughed. And one evening, sitting on the back deck as the sun dipped low, he heard Emma laugh from the living room. It was the same laugh Linda once had. But this time, it didn't hurt to hear. It reminded him of what remained, what was real, what had never betrayed him. Himself. His children. And the peace he'd built, plank by plank, from everything broken. One afternoon in late July, nearly 2 years after the collapse, Jim received a certified letter that bore no return address. Inside was a simple legal document, a notification of permanent transfer of guardianship from Linda to him, signed and notarized. There was no personal note, no flourish of words, just the formal surrender of maternal rights. Jim sat quietly at the kitchen table for a long time. It wasn't victory. It wasn't closure. It was just the last thread being snipped. He didn't tell the kids right away. Instead, he waited for a moment that felt natural. The following weekend, as they sat on the grass at the lakefront watching a small fireworks show over the water, he told them gently. It's just us now. No more appointments. No more waiting rooms. Just us. Emma leaned into him, her head against his chest. That sounds perfect. And it was. In August, Jim took a long weekend and drove the kids to the Upper Peninsula. They hiked, rented a small cabin, and watched the stars at night. No internet. No distractions. Just stories by the fire, pancakes in the morning, and the constant sound of waves. One night, as they sat quietly on the beach, Timmy pointed to the sky and said, I hope Mommy's okay, even if she can't be with us. Jim placed a hand on his son's back. Me too, buddy. Me too. The anger had long since left him. All that remained was something cleaner. Not forgiveness, maybe, but understanding. In the fall, Jim started volunteering at the school, building a set for the winter play. He discovered he had a gift for carpentry, something he'd neglected during his marriage. One of the teachers, a kind woman named April, started joining him after school to help. She had a laugh like falling leaves, and the patience of someone who'd known real sorrow. They didn't talk much about their pasts at first, only tools, paint, scripts. But by November, Jim found himself smiling just a little too long when she was near. One evening, after the final rehearsal, April stood beside him in the empty auditorium and said, You have a beautiful family. He nodded. It's not what I expected. But it's everything I need. She looked at him for a moment, then whispered, Sometimes we find the right thing after the wreckage. He didn't answer right away. But when they walked out to the parking lot, side by side, he didn't feel the weight of memory dragging him back. He felt forward motion. In December, Emma performed in the school play, her lines loud and clear, her eyes always scanning the audience to find her father. And when she saw him in the third row, smiling, she didn't look away. She held his gaze until the curtain closed. Afterward, they walked out into the snow together, hand in hand, the town glimmering in Christmas lights. Jim looked down at his daughter and said, You were amazing up there. She grinned. I get it from you. And he realized then, truly and deeply, that he hadn't lost everything. He had found something better. Himself, rebuilt. His children, safe. And a future, wide open. A week before Christmas, as Jim helped Timmy hang paper snowflakes in the living room window, the phone rang. It was Linda's mother. He hadn't heard from her in over a year. Jim, she said, her voice quiet, tired. She's fading. He paused. Linda? Yes. She's been in a long-term care wing for months now. Mostly quiet. But today she asked if the children were okay. Then she asked for you. Jim didn't speak for a long moment. She's not dying, the woman added quickly. But she's not really living either. Why call me now? Because she may not have much time left to understand anything. And I thought maybe you'd want to say goodbye before she slips away for good. Jim thanked her and hung up. He didn't tell the kids. He drove alone to the care facility that weekend, stepping into the antiseptic quiet of a place that felt more like a shadow than a hospital. The nurse led him to a small room, where Linda sat by the window, staring blankly outside. She looked older. Fragile. Her eyes didn't react until he sat beside her. Slowly, she turned her head. "Jim," she whispered. "Hi. Is it winter?" she asked, her voice distant. "Yes." She looked at her hands. "I always liked winter, when the lights were up and the house smelled like cinnamon." Jim nodded. "The kids still hang lights." A small smile flickered and died. "Do they remember me?" "They remember some things." She nodded slowly. "Do they hate me?" "No," he said quietly. "But they've let go. Like I have." A long silence followed. "I messed up so much." "Yes," he said. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. "Tell them I'm sorry," she finally said. "If it matters." "It matters," Jim said, rising. "But they're happy now. That's all that matters to me." Linda closed her eyes. "I wish I could go back." "We all do, Linda. We all do." He left her sitting there, half in shadow, half in winter light. Outside, the air was sharp and clean. He filled his lungs with it, and didn't look back. That Christmas Eve, the kids woke to the smell of cinnamon and orange peels simmering on the stove. Emma hugged him around the waist and said, "This is the best Christmas ever." Jim kissed the top of her head. "Yeah," he said. "It really is." Later that night, he sat by the fire alone after the kids went to bed, a warm mug in his hands, his heart calm. He thought of how far they'd come. What had been lost? What had been saved? Then he looked at the Christmas tree, glowing softly in the corner of the room. One gift tag caught his eye, Emma's careful handwriting. "To Dad. For always being there." Jim smiled. He didn't need anything else. The new year began with quiet clarity. No grand resolutions, no dramatic promises, just steady days, clean mornings, laughter at breakfast, and nights without dread. Jim had learned to appreciate the ordinary, to find comfort in predictability. There were still challenges, balancing work with school pickups, late-night fevers, scraped knees, and the occasional pang of old memories. But these were the honest weights of fatherhood, not the corrosive burden of betrayal. April, now a more constant presence, had gently stepped into their lives without forcing herself into spaces not yet hers. She was patient with the children, never overstepping, and kind in a way that didn't feel rehearsed. One evening, while helping Emma with a science project, she asked Jim, "Do you think you'll ever get married again?" Jim considered the question. "Maybe," he said. "But not because I need to. Only if it feels like the next step in something already good." April smiled. "That's the right answer." The seasons turned. Spring arrived again, full of new green and old reminders. It was almost 3 years to the day since Linda had danced away from him at that club, hand in hand with a man who didn't even last the season. Jim no longer marked the date. It was a scar that no longer hurt when touched. In May, he received a simple email from the care facility. Linda had passed away in her sleep, quietly, without incident. Natural causes, the report said. No autopsy requested. No services planned. The facility offered to release her belongings: a journal, a silver ring, a faded photo of their family from a summer long past. Jim thanked them but declined. He told the children a few days later, sitting with them on the back deck, watching birds flit through the trees. Emma was silent for a long time, then said, "Maybe now she can be at peace." Timmy asked, "Are we still okay?" Jim pulled them both into his arms. "We were always okay." Life went on. The house, once full of echoes, was now full of voices. The kind that spoke of dreams, of school plays, of backyard games and pancakes for dinner. April stayed. Never pushed. And one day, at a quiet lakeside bench, Jim took her hand and simply said, "Stay as long as you want." She didn't answer right away. She just leaned into him, her hand tight in his, the lake rippling gently in front of them. That summer, Jim finally took the family road trip he had once dreamed of, the kind that winds through forests and mountains and endless two-lane roads with music playing and kids singing in the back seat. There were no deadlines, no detours, and no ghosts in the rearview mirror. Just three hearts, healed, steady, and free. By late summer, Jim realized something had changed, not loudly, not suddenly, but with quiet permanence. He no longer thought of what had happened as the defining story of his life. It was just a story now, part of the fabric, not the whole. At work, he was promoted to regional manager, overseeing multiple sites. At home, Timmy had joined a little league team and asked Jim to coach. Emma had entered middle school and started writing short stories, some sad, some funny, all honest. They talked openly now, about feelings, about the past, about trust. There were no more secrets in their home. On the night before the first day of school, Jim sat alone on the porch as the kids slept. April came out with 2 mugs of tea and a blanket. "Nervous?" she asked. He shook his head. "Grateful." She rested her head on his shoulder. "You did good, Jim." He looked out into the dark. "We did good." And then he said the words that had once seemed impossible. "I think I'm ready. For whatever comes next." April smiled. "You've been ready. You just had to believe it." A few weeks later, as the leaves began to turn, Jim and the kids stood outside a new house, not a replacement, not a retreat, but a fresh start. It wasn't bigger. But it was brighter. Fewer memories lived inside its walls. More would be made. They painted their own rooms. Picked out furniture. Planted a tree in the backyard. "So we can watch it grow," Timmy said. And in the hallway above the staircase, Emma hung a framed piece of paper with her handwriting. It read, "Sometimes we fall. But someone will always catch us." Jim stood before it one morning, staring at the words, and felt something shift inside him. Not a break. Not a collapse. But a release. Like breathing out after holding your breath too long. That night, as they sat around the dinner table, April included, he looked at the faces that mattered most. "To new chapters," he said, raising his glass of water. They all clinked. Nothing dramatic. Nothing cinematic. Just peace. Earned. Held. And finally understood. If this story stirred something real, hit like, subscribe, and stay for more. What tales should unfold next? Whose silence, whose storm, whose truth?